Hi guys, well look, thanks so much for joining today. We really appreciate your attendance and looking forward to a discussion. I think the title, let me go back to the title. All right, so the title is Cloud Security Awareness, Enabling the Human Firewall While Scaling. I think as a first point of call, we should just do some intros, talk about ourselves, what roles we play, our companies, and because we're talking about human firewall while scaling, maybe a bit about the companies that you work for. Jonathan, we know each other quite well. Chris, this is the first time I've met you. So looking forward to hearing a bit more about yourself. And I'll just get us started. So I'm Rich, I'm CEO and co-founder of Metomic. We are a European-based company, SaaS company that helps scaling tech companies prevent data leaks in their cloud applications, their SaaS applications. So we're going to talk a little bit about Metomic towards the end of today, but mostly today we're going to talk about you guys and get your opinions on this concept of the human firewall. So let's get started with some intros on your side. Jonathan, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Jonathan Jaffe. I'm the CISO at Lemonade Insurance. The company is headquartered in the US. We're an insurtech company with, it's over 1 million customers, but I'm not sure what the number is now. The technology is built here where I'm at in Israel. And it's been one of those companies that exploded in a very short time and is doing quite well. And we are 100% cloud based. We're cloud native. The tech we use is really fun stuff, but it also means we have cloud scale problems with security.
Nice. And sorry if you've mentioned it, but how many employees are you now?
I'm not sure if it's public, so I'll just say between 1,000 and 2,000.
Okay, great. So north of 1,000, really.
Yeah.
And Lemonade's a public company, correct?
We are. That's right.
You are a public company. One of the first, I think, insurtech public companies, which is awesome. Love what you guys are doing. Christopher Russell, tell us a bit about yourself.
Yep, Chris Russell. I'm the CISO at tZERO Group. We're a blockchain fintech company focusing on private markets. We're looking at democratizing markets, starting with private and then some things into the public markets. But we're mainly a tech company helping companies do their own internal offerings with a lot of things in our roadmap. And again, we're very heavily in the cloud, so we have those same issues. But what's interesting is my first job was penetrating the human firewall as a human intelligence collector. So the weaknesses and strengths that humans both bring are something that I spent a lot of time exploring and thinking about and doing things to kind of interact with.
All right, amazing. We're looking forward to getting your opinion, Chris. And tZERO, roughly how many employees and where's everyone?
We're just short of 100, so we're pretty lean still. But we just got some new leadership. We got some pretty cool things on the roadmap. So, everyone says they feel like, we're about to explode, but I do really feel that way.
Okay, cool. So we've got a perfect little blend here, right? So we got Jonathan Lemonade, more of the 1,000 types employees all over, like different places in the world. We got Chris, you more around the 100 mark. We got Metomic more around the 25 mark. So we've got a blend of different magnitudes here going on, which is great. All right, so for the audience that are here, we've got the title, Enabling the Human Firewall Scaling. We're going to get Chris's, Jonathan's opinions on what this is, how to make it work, if it exists at all. And we're just going to have an informal chat about these things. So drop your questions in the chat. I think Zoom makes it pretty clear how to do that. Just drop your questions and we'll get over to those at the end. So we're going to spend anywhere between probably just 20 and 30 minutes with a conversation with Jonathan and Chris here. We'll then briefly, just because it was talked so much as a request after the last webinar, I will talk for 5 minutes about Metomic. I'm not here to sell Metomic, but we did get a lot of requests to tell us a bit about Metomic. So I'll very briefly introduce Metomic. And that time we should have accrued enough questions to have another 10-minute conversation at the end. So we're going to keep this a lean chat. We're going to get to the meat of it quite quickly. And I'm going to start off with a quote, and then I'm going to ask Chris and Jonathan for some definitions, because I don't think it really exists too much. The quote is this: 88% of data breaches are caused by human error, with AIG reporting human errors and behavior continue to be a significant driver of cyber claims. Jonathan, going to turn to you first. What is the human firewall? And it's fine to say, I don't really know I've never heard of this term before. You tell me, Rich, but to you, what's the human firewall?
To me, it's a bit of a catchphrase, the sort of thing you would get out of Gartner. It's kind of like 6-7 years ago, identity is the new perimeter, a buzz phrase. It doesn't mean that it's not legitimate, but when I hear it, that's what I think of. With the quote from, I think it was AIG, is that where you got the quote from?
That's where I got written here, yeah.
Yeah, with the quote, as you were reading it, I was thinking first that the human firewall is people not clicking on phishing mails and being socially engineered. But as I think about it, that number, 88%, could also be misconfigurations done by people. So maybe the human firewall is more than just what your frontline employees are doing when they click on mails, but also how well educated they are in their specific job, like configuration or configuration management.
Right. Okay. So you're describing it sort of it's what humans, when you were talking about humans, we're mainly talking about employees, right? For you, Jonathan, it's what employees are doing that might contribute towards leaking sensitive data in the wrong place, whether it be clicking on links or changing configurations or putting data in the wrong place. This is all what you sort of talk about in terms of the human firewall.
Yeah, as much as I've thought about it, yeah.
Okay, cool. But it's a buzzword. That's interesting. Okay, so it's a bit of a.
I think so.
A bit of a buzzword. All right, Jonathan, I have to say your camera's great. I can just see it sort of moving and you move your head. Yeah, we've got some good tech going on here. All right, Chris, to you, what's the human firewall to you?
So I think there's two aspects of the human firewall. Obviously, we've all heard the statistics and the number of times how the humans are the weakest link and the kind of the chain, and we're, the easiest thing to kind of fool and trick. But I also think we're also the smartest and we're the strongest part of all these programs, because we can do things that none of these tools can do on their own. We see things, we can put things together that with all the best AI and ML in the world that exists right now, it doesn't compare to the human brain. So it's just a matter of harnessing that and using that to bridge the gaps for your technology. And when you get those people really understanding how the technology is supposed to work, and kind of like what Jonathan mentioned, understand the configuration piece and really understanding that piece and doing things the right way. When they understand it at a higher level, they do create this extra barrier that the tools themselves can't do on their own.
Yeah. And for you guys, when you think about the idea of like data breaches, leaking data, things that ultimately isn't great for your guys' roles, what you don't want to happen, how much do you think about humans being the likelihood of causing these events to happen? Like, is that the sort of thing, if anything's going to happen, it's going to be a human making a mistake? Firstly, that, and then secondly, is it humans doing something maliciously or non-maliciously? Like, can you just break that down in terms of security risks going on, how much of that is humans and how much of it is malicious versus non-malicious? Jonathan, thoughts?
Sure. Let's see. I think it's a large component. I don't know if it's the majority of my risk. When I think of the human component, I think primarily of people who have excessive privileges or groups like IT whose job it is to help to reduce friction and help people get to things. They often will have excessive privileges, and they don't have the security perspective of worrying about whether or not this is going to be exploited. That component, I think, is actually quite large in terms of all of my risk. But I also think that there are just numerous technical factors that aren't dependent upon people, which is the constant attacks that we all suffer from every day on the site through other means.
Okay, and then roughly, like, just in terms of a really rough proportion of these, is it like 50-50, like one part of it is anything going wrong internally, accidentally or not, and then the other part is outside of employees, people trying to get into your systems? What's the balance of those things? Is it roughly even weighted?
Well, it will depend upon how well you've protected yourself in a given area. So before you come in and say, build a strong cloud security posture or build a good access and identity and access management program, the technical aspects are probably going to outweigh, the technical risks are going to severely outweigh. So human risks, so 90%. Like if I didn't have two-factor authentication everywhere, then suddenly I'm really likely to have just a credential stuffing breach. Right. Once you have that in place and you've secured a lot of your technical infrastructure. Then you focus on the risks which are human, and those are over, say, 50% at that point.
Right. Okay. Cool. That's great. That's great. That's really good to know. And then, Chris, you talked a lot about the human brain, which I loved. The human brain is the most powerful thing. Tell us about, when you think about all of the risks that you're exposed to at any given time, how do you think about humans playing a part in that?
Yeah, so I think the frequency of humans on a low level, responding to phishing attempts, those are high frequency, so that kind of gets a lot of noise and a lot of attention. But I think the severity level is low on a lot of those. It's one host, it's a workstation. As long as you have other controls in place, it's not that big of a deal. What is a bigger deal is kind of what Jonathan was mentioning is when you're developing a product and you're pushing it out and you're maybe on the bleeding edge of some of these new frameworks. I specifically work in the blockchain space. And there's, let's say I'll use the example Solana as a blockchain where people write smart contracts. There's just not enough people with experience on how to write them securely. And there's even less people with the experience on how to audit them to make sure that they don't have some sort of weakness in their logic. The same thing goes for APIs and just the way we're trying to provide a good user experience. And it's probably the same in insurtech as in fintech. We're trying to get them answers now, the data they need now, trying to move faster the product, trying to make it seamless. There's a lot of risk we're taking because we're doing things that weren't necessarily ever built before. And we have to, think of all the possible things that could get exploited, all the fault logic. And without some tools and some experience, you don't even know what you don't know. So, and I think that's where you risk like large data breaches, large kind of errors and large mistakes.
So like both of you talked about it's definitely being a problem and something that you have to think about. How do you measure whether it's getting better or whether it's getting worse? Like how do you quantify this risk and decide how much you're going to invest in making your employees more conscious of these things? Like how do you basically measure the state of the human firewall, let's say? Chris, what are your thoughts?
Chris, you first.
Yeah. I think you have to measure through a number of ways. I don't think there's one standard, you have a phishing tool and your numbers are decreasing or increasing. I don't think that's comprehensive. That's one data point that you should keep in the equation. Yeah. But your risk framework that you've adhered to, how are you progressing along there? Your mitigating controls, are those improving? The whole maturity of your program, as that's maturing and your phishing tools are doing better and you're seeing overall less incidents and you're cutting down on false positives. It's this holistic approach of, as you see more time spent on legitimate issues and not non-issues, I think that's when you start seeing it's being improved, in my opinion.
Chris, just
I think that's really, really well stated. Yeah, I think that's very well stated.
That's what you're saying as well. You mentioned, Chris, you mentioned a couple of things there. So firstly, and Jonathan, because you talked about this, you talked about like, there's obviously the accident, like clicking on a phishing link. And then there's the other slightly different thing, which is putting data in the wrong place, maybe downloading a new SaaS app and using it with personal data. Chris, you talked about phishing as well. What do you also think about the accidental, just employees doing their jobs, putting data in the wrong place, which is a little bit more proactive than accidentally clicking on a link, but actually like going about doing their jobs? Like, does that come into the human component for you as well?
Yeah, it definitely does. We've got people that have sprints and they have to push out a new aspect of their app, and they've got 2 weeks to do it, and they're working with maybe a couple different third-party integration, and they have to share secrets, they have to share tokens, they have to pass keys, they have to do all these things. And unless you have a method to do that works at the speed which they do, they're going to find ways around that. And they're going to be like, well, I can just Slack it real quick and then I'll delete it and it'll be fine, or I can send a one-time email thing, or whatnot. So those are things where you have to be an enabler for the business to meet their deadlines, and not have this process that makes sharing these things just arduous and non-feasible thing, because they will find a way around it. If you make it painful, if you make it not feasible, if you make it inefficient, they will work around that. And with the amount of SaaS tools out there, it's really hard to monitor and block them all. So they will find a way around it. So you have to give them an easy, no-brainer way so that you can at least keep it in that one lane.
Jonathan, I assume Lemonade's grown pretty quickly. I assume there's a lot of people that want to do stuff quickly at Lemonade. Same sort of thing. You just see people trying to just get around stuff to do things as quick. Not necessarily malicious. They're not trying to do anything bad, right?
No, no, definitely not maliciously, just trying to meet deadlines. Yep.
Is that the same for you, Jonathan? I assume the same thing, right?
Yeah, no, I think it's universal. Like a developer's job is to produce code, to solve a business problem. And she's got a product manager who's saying, okay, you're going to do this feature in this 2-week sprint. And so she's going to do what she's got to do. Exactly as Chris said, if security tries to step in there and put really tight controls on that, well, water will always find a way to get past a dam at some point. And that's what the developer will do. So you have to work with them. So you give them something that doesn't create friction, too much friction, and is reasonable, but also gives you some of the control that you need.
Yeah, I love that analogy as well. Water will find its way through almost anything given enough time. And it seems to do the same thing, yeah. So I'm going to start, I've got some ideas about what this might be, but I'm going to leave it broad. So Chris, how long have you been at tZERO?
Just a year as of last week.
Okay, so a year was last week. And Jonathan, you at Lemonade, a bit longer, right?
I'm coming up on 2 years in 1 month. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll go with you first. How is this concept of human firewall, how much brain power you're putting into it, how much you're thinking about it, how much it worries you? How has it changed a lot's happened in the last 2 years? How has it changed at all? As you've grown, as the world's changed a little bit? How has it changed since you arrived and now where you are now?
For me, and I think at Lemonade, it's changed not so much because of the technology, although there is a technological component. It's changed just because I had certain programs that had to get done first, second, third. Security awareness, when we were a smaller company, was something that wasn't as difficult to do because actually with just 400 people at the time, you could get to know a lot of people, and those people know people. You weren't so far removed. As we've grown and as certain technologies come about, actually I'm a big Metomic fan, certain technologies like Metomic allow us to actually push the awareness down to the end user by sending them a notice about, say in Metomic's case, you've got a file that includes some sensitive information. Could you please close this? And we've built some automations that actually just go straight to the user around that. And that's actually how we're dealing with the human firewall component, to educate people in a more automatic way.
Right. At some stage, right, you have to scale beyond the security team. And this is, something we see with a lot of our customers, right? Before they use Metomic, they're sending individual messages, they're finding stuff in SaaS apps, and then they're messaging those individuals one by one and saying, hey, don't do this. That only scales up to a certain size. And then you've got to start thinking about how to automate these things. Chris, since your time at tZERO over the last year, how has it changed for you? Like, have you thought about these things differently now to what you were a year ago?
Yeah, so I think for me, and I won't repeat what Jonathan said, but I agree with everything he mentioned. So I'll just add on a kind of my piece. At a smaller org, everyone was used to CISOs and the security department kind of being that, like, they're people that say no and put roadblocks in and whatever. And so for me coming in and coming from a background where I understood that you need to support the business, and your job isn't to say no, it's to figure out how to say yes, yes with caveats, yes, this is how we can do it securely. And so with working with not just the executives, but with a lot of developers personally, like I have the open door policy where they can ping me on Slack. I'll work through them. And I'm understanding that I'll help them figure it out, and I will try and find a seamless way to do it the right way. Has just increased the awareness across all those teams, I would say. Instead of them saying, like, I don't even want to bring this up because if I do, it's going to be this long problem. They know if they bring it up with me, I'm going to give them a feasible solution that they can deal with. So I see a lot more developers in my organization really embracing security, AppSec, just other pieces, coming to me proactively with, hey, we're about to do this. Is there anything we should look at or could be concerned about? And that part, the cultural part and kind of the having those champions and having that buy-in really is about the CISO or whoever is head of security really explaining that he's there to help, not to just put roadblocks and to cover his butt, but to literally try and enable the company. And that mindset, if that permeates, you'll find the awareness part and the buy-in becomes a lot easier.
Right, it's like sowing the seed, like the small things are putting these seeds in place, right? And it so takes over, the sort of like forms itself. because that's you mentioned a couple of things that are really interesting, right? Like the pointing champions, allowing developers to go straight to you and your team. Just on the ground floor inside your company, what does the human, like, paint the picture of the human firewall? Is it a bunch of, if I'm a new joiner, what happens? What does the human firewall look like to me? Do I have to sign some policies? Just talk us through that. It'd be great to know.
Yeah, so there's a lot of policies. They go right through that. I do a presentation for a lot of people, just kind of talking about our program and our stack and other things. But more importantly, everyone knows when someone new comes in and they're starting on a project, they point them right at me and they say, "Hey, go just include him on the onboarding, on the planning, whatever," and he'll start chiming in on some things you need to kind of be concerned about. But overall, I've just seen the proactiveness of new people going, "Hey, I don't know much about the security piece, this AppSec. I'm new to this new SDLC where we have these kind of pipe, pieces along, gates along the way where it's going to get, static code's going to get scanned and whatnot." And we have it, just kind of making a very seamless kind of, painless process, but also being completely available for them so they don't feel like they have, like, if it takes 2 days to get a response, they're just never going to call you again. So you got to help them in the moment. They're trying to push something through, something's failing, and you got to, help a health check or whatnot. Just them seeing you being available, being proactive, and helping them through the process. I've found them coming to me more. And so that, I guess, I'm kind of rambling on that one, but it's, I'm just kind of emphasizing my main point.
Got to be a friendly face. Got to be a friendly face, right? Got to people to say, "I want Chris to be in this meeting to kick off this project."
I think I want to comment on that. So that's right. I think the problem comes when the company gets so big that you and your security team, which my experience doesn't grow as quickly as the company does, are no longer a person that people will see in the halls, which is even more difficult these days, of course. So I think we have to figure out some other way to make people interested in security. And I have not figured that out. Of course, I try things and some people are receptive, but when you have a few hundred developers, I no longer know them all. And I haven't figured out how to do what Chris is talking about. You can make yourself open, of course, but to get people, go ahead, Chris.
No, I was just going to say it's exactly right. I was thinking about this earlier. What you want, ideally, is you have like this, set of security training videos that's really tailored toward the different teams. So you have like your finance team has some training, and your developers have some training. It's kind of the stuff that you would normally be talking about with them. But no one's really making that. And if they are making that, they're not making it in a way where people will watch it or pay attention. So if no one's solved this problem, and if they did, they'd be rich right now because everyone would be using them. And it really is an issue at scale to get everyone on the same page, but also give them granular enough training that it's actually relevant to their job and they don't just tune out. It's a problem I don't think anyone's solved yet. To make this a little more interesting, I have a little back and forth. I'll tell you about an idea I was talking about with my security team just yesterday. We were thinking of having a hackathon between the different people on different services, or building a different microservice, and having them try and attack another service's service.
Oh, I love
it. We haven't landed on whether or not that will work yet, but the idea of having your team, if you're in a squad, attack another service's product to find vulnerabilities. You can always know where yours are. Should be fun, and I'm hoping would inspire people to then think again about how their code is vulnerable.
That's a really good idea.
What do you guys think? Is it worth doing?
I think that's a great idea, and I think it also builds a little internal team camaraderie with a inner team kind of competitiveness and a little bit of bragging rights. You got all the recipes for people buying in and kind of being excited about it, but also learning something from it. And all the people that weren't necessarily previously even thinking about what kind of exploits are there are now looking at other applications, and then as they see them, they're thinking, "Oh, okay, I've got Spring Boot too, and I've got Java, whatever, and Log4j, and mine aren't upgraded." So they start thinking about what they have, and they'll probably, in theory, at least if they take a couple things away from it, start, upgrading their things a little bit faster and writing things a little bit more securely.
Well, it's like two birds with one stone, right, Jonathan? Because you've got one, you might actually uncover some vulnerabilities through that hack day, which would be huge. And then B, it's
Yeah.
again, it's that C, it's like it just raises the awareness. People start thinking about these things, and then they don't stop thinking about them. Maybe consciously the next day they focus on their job again, but it's they're thinking about it now, which is obviously really important. So just wrapping up this thing here, because this is really important. So Chris, slightly smaller company. So I'm going to ask you the question of, if there's one, there's probably a lot of people who are going to be watching this that are arriving in new companies as the first time security person, or maybe they're in their first security roles. What's like one thing that you've done that you think's had a really big impact in enabling this human firewall for a company of your size? Like one sort of decision that you made that's really paid dividends over time?
Trying to think about one thing. Obviously I've done a couple company-wide kind of sessions to get everyone on the same page, so they're hearing the same exact, around data privacy. It's one thing to do individual training, it's one thing to have videos, but like got in front of a couple of these, townhouses and just talked about data privacy and PII and some other aspects of it. It made it pretty interactive. I made it sort of interesting, but I would say I probably got the most bang out of my butt for that, because not only did they hear it in a more watered down version that I'm probably a little bit better at kind of explaining it to groups that are not as security conscious or technical, so I could kind of speak that language and kind of hit all the different groups buzzwords and put the context in that, for you this means you're worrying about this PII, but you guys aren't worrying about, you're worrying about this. So kind of making it more tailored had a good effect. But then having them see how it's not just their piece, they're interconnected with other parts of the organization, understanding how they're part of a bigger picture, I think was a little bit eye-opening for some people, realizing it's like, it's not just my little app that runs here in the service. This then feeds this, which feeds this, and there's this whole chain of it. And if I'm starting it wrong here and I'm including too much data in this original, and it just keeps going down the chain, it's not just a closed silo. So kind of getting that not silo mentality, I would say, kind of came out of that. Not the most spectacular thing, but off the top of my head, I would say that's something that I think
very much like educational, just raising awareness.
Education, but context aware. Context aware, like what it means for our business, not just what PII is, but specifically what it meant to each business unit, to certain applications, to certain projects. Really got into the examples, so people understood when and where they have it, and how they were dealing with it, and how organizations were doing it, and then all at once, so we all were on the same page too, for the most part, instead of a little bit here and there, and then the message varies a little bit, and then people don't necessarily are working on the same information. So
but tying it in some way, what I'm hearing is tying it into the purpose of the business and why it's important for you, right?
And as Jonathan mentioned, that's easy when it's a small organization. When you're at 1,000, you're not going to get them all on fireside. So you probably do have to break it up into business units or teams or whatnot. But at least on the team level, you can be pretty specific on that team's personal contextual situation around whatever the security, whether it's data privacy or AppSec or whatever it is. The more granular and specific you can get, the more kind of just in tuned and involved they're going to be, and probably get more out of it.
Right, perfect. That's great. And then Jonathan, you both got new employees coming and going every day, but you certainly, Jonathan, how do you think about enabling this company-wide, department-wide, individually? Like they got to get a bit more less scalable to go down, but what sort of things do you, like clear things that you, like advice to maybe others that you put in whilst you're scaling to keep this human firewall in place and making sure that people are still aware?
Trying to automate as much of the responsibility or notification of issues to the person who's raised an issue. And I spoke about this before, but if somebody's making a mistake, like sharing a file or misconfiguring something, which are two very different problems, if you can automate a response that in near real time notifies them of the issue, there's proximity, which increases learning and retention. I find that works well. We've been working on that a lot lately with some automation software we have. The other area that I think is useful, and something that we're doing now as we're a bigger company, is focusing on a particular risk. In this case, it might be excessive permissions with the large IT team. And what we're trying to do there is give them a way to graduate into higher higher responsibility roles
Yeah.
by having them take training and then working with the security team, say once a week answering security tickets, level 1 security tickets. So they see what we see and they start to think about the problems that misconfigurations cause.
Yeah.
So when they get more responsibility, like before somebody becomes a global admin, you would want them to understand the risks of having that role.
Right. Yeah. That's super interesting. And on the employee notifications, I mean, Jonathan, you know that this is part of our product. Now, I'll be honest with you guys and the audience here. When we rolled out, so Chris may be a little bit less familiar with Metomic, and those in the audience as well. One of our features and one of our most used features is the automatic trigger of notifications upon certain events. People creating Google Drive folders that are public, people sharing the wrong data inside Slack or Jira or GitHub, and notifying them. I've been impressed, surprised, and happy at the impact that has on employees not doing the same thing again afterwards. Just a small message, making sure that you get it right according to the, you want to be confident that the trigger's correct, that it's not a false positive, but when you get it right and they realize that they did make a mistake, they don't do it again because they never really intended to do it in the first place. So we found that being really effective in just raising the awareness, and literally we see the number of these human errors going down over time just because of these awareness put in at the individual level even.
Can I ask you a question about Metomic and whether or not you're heading in this direction, or I'm just not aware of it? Do you show the overall trend in terms of different categories of error that people cause? And I mean, I know you show trends because I'm
yeah.
But do you correlate it to notifications of people?
It's a great, so this is the thing, we've got, we've certainly got this ability. We haven't exposed it in the product yet, but it's one of the features that we're working on, because it is some of the most impactful statistics that we've seen. The change in behavior, the change in basically incidents that can occur via these notifications. So, I knew that it's important, but I didn't realize how important it was going to be for our customers and just for tech companies as a whole. Is that something you would like to see, Jonathan? I mean, I might as well use this.
Yeah, that's the next level that I'm at now that I've tuned Metomic, so it's really doing a lot of the work that we had to do. I want to see how impactful the direct messaging is to see if the issues themselves aren't arising because of the messaging.
Okay, cool. Well, we're going to take that offline certainly and think about that alongside you, because that sounds like a really important feature. All right, so Chris, just coming back to you for a second. Couple of things. One, growth is important, right? We talked about this at the beginning. I think we were talking about before everyone joined as well. The last thing any tech company wants to do is get in the way of employees, right? Because then we'll all be out of jobs anyway. So we don't want that to happen. How do you balance these things? How do you balance like taking the time for presentations, notifications that people have to pay attention to, maybe blocking some activities, and the fact that really, one of the core focuses for any businesses is to grow and to keep getting quicker, and SaaS and all these tools make things easier. How do you balance those two things?
Well, sitting through the, prioritization and kind of executive meetings where we're talking about like what particular, project is the priority, you kind of understand, okay, the first thing we're doing right now is, let's say we're doing this merge or this upgrade or whatnot. So you kind of understand like that's the primary thing that needs to get the most amount of effort into it. And then you kind of build that mental list, or, might actually have a physical list of, whether it's a Kanban board or something's built into Jira, where you actually kind of know from a prioritization standpoint what resources are being prioritized. And I just try and match our security support for that to, the same level that everyone else is giving effort into it. So if, a certain percentage of developers are working on a certain project and that's the hot thing, then the security staff, we're going to drop what we're doing and reprioritize if an issue comes up with that, so that we can kind of, mimic that. But, as Jonathan mentioned, as you scale and you end up with a lot of, you don't necessarily get, your security stuff doesn't necessarily scale as big as your developer team might. So you have to have, like you mentioned, the automation in there. So you have to build things that are able to triage the low level events away and kind of prioritize themselves, so you can focus on, real security issues going forward. So you have to build the system across, whether it's your EDR, whether it's something like Metomic, whether it's your SaaS, your DAS, your IDS. You have to build in those automations where you are, probably doing your own prioritization not just relying on vendor classifications and what's criticals and highs. It's got to be specific to your environment, but build that out so that you're not jumping every time something comes off, and you can kind of, know that some things can take a little bit longer to get to, and you have a little bit of time before you have to focus on those.
Yeah. And Jonathan, you mentioned something before, which is interesting, because at the end of the day, these, certainly in SaaS tools, I mean, SaaS has introduced a very interesting concept just to the way of work, right? Which is very much, a lot of these tools are time-based. Slack messages, Notion files, you use them for a point and then they eventually become redundant. Slack messages, certainly, the next day, no one's really using Slack messages the day after. So you've got the point in time where someone's trying to do something, a developer trying to get their job done, meet some sprint goals, and they want to do something, but they might in that leave some trail behind them. They might leave a little bit of risk behind. How much of this is blocking these things in the first place? How do you make sure you're not blocking them doing their stuff, but taking care of things after it's done, right? And not just leaving sensitive data sitting in the wrong places for no reason when its job has been done. Do you think about those things, right? Like point in time versus after it's been used?
I'm not at that point yet. Still trying to catch up with automating most of my responses, blocking things in real time or getting people to undo things. But that's probably a problem I'll look at in, 3 or 6 months. For one reason is because people just don't like to have the history of their Slack messages removed, or having things taken out or redacted. And it's just not a social fight that I'm willing to deal with yet. I do realize that once I solve the bigger problems of unsharing files or identifying files with important information and preventing this from being shared, then I'll have the long tail issue of, okay, how do I deal with things that say might be in Slack that are residual and dangerous because they're still there that I need to clean up?
Right. Yeah. Well, that's good, because one of the things that we've been thinking about with some of our customers is, so we've got notifications, but notifications to employees to say, did you mean to share that data? Is that meant to be there? And giving them the choice to say, yes, it needs to be there. And then saying, how long does it need to be there? And they say, it needs to be there for a day, right? It needs to be there for this amount of time. And then Metomic will take care of the redaction afterwards, or ask them again in 2 weeks. Like, you left this file public 2 weeks ago. Is it still needing to be public? And again, this is part of the human firewall, right? Because then they're the ones cleaning up their own risks behind them, because they know they don't need to be there anymore. So it's an exciting thing that I think is the way, not getting in the way of employees on the front line, but taking care of stuff behind the scenes.
Yeah, that's really.
Go ahead, Chris.
I would say that's a really interesting point. That's something that we have adopted probably earlier than we needed to, or we have a lot of time-based things where the access is only good for a certain amount of time. You request, with some our own tools we built, where whether you're whitelisting something, whatever, you request it, you get it for a day, and then it's gone. Instead of having these lists of things that just need to be cleaned up afterwards. So having time-based things set up from the beginning is just so much better than manually putting in and having to have a period where you have to go back and scrub it all and figure out what permission was needed and from where and for all that. So the time-based thing from the get-go, if you can start off with that, is just saves you so much time and effort later down the road.
Chris, did you say, sorry, Rich, did you say you've built all of those tools, or have you found it like?
Yeah, so some of them were built in-house. I won't go too far into it because I'm a blue teamer and I don't want to tell everyone. But yeah, they were built in-house to which is a pain to maintain. You have to own the technical debt of the actual tool and app itself. But it gives you time-based, ways of accessing things that just goes away, and then you have to recommit.
Cool. I asked because I'm looking for privileged access management solutions that are more modern than CyberArk and beyond trust.
Yeah, exactly. That was the exact same problem. Like, we don't want it. That's almost as bad as doing it manually right now. So
yeah.
Jonathan, you've opened yourself up now. You're on a public webinar. You said, I'm looking for this. Be prepared for some LinkedIn.
I already have all the calls from, I won't drop the names of the companies.
Okay, that's good. That's cool. Okay, you're already on top of it, which is good. Okay, so the final thing on the human file, we've talked very much about the human file from individuals, departments, people doing their jobs. Let's briefly talk about the exec team, the people from the top. A lot of it can come from them. First point is, Chris, how do you get buy-in? How do you get them to, they're thinking about growth and a series of other metrics that probably right now aren't really security related. How do you get buy-in from those levels of the human firewall?
Well, you have to speak in terms of risk, and you have to translate your metrics into things that they understand, like ARR, MRR. Your metrics can't just be we had 10,000 security events, because your CFO doesn't know if 10,000 is good or bad. What you have to say is it cost us three men 40 hours a week, which translates to this much a month or year or whatever. You have to translate it to those terms so the rest of the business can understand. It's a common language. They can cross-reference with other departments and see, okay, it's costing us this much to do business this way. From a monetary standpoint, we have this much risk, for these decisions too. And so risk and translate it to dollars, I think, is the easiest way to just, make it understandable and digestible for the rest of the business. The other part is you have to, again, explain how you're enabling people, explain how what you're doing is not going to be a roadblock. If you have failed deployments that start blocking your app and taking things down, you're not going to last very long. So you have to do good planning on that too, and you have to deliver. But I think the most important part for buy-in is speaking the right language and really communicating the real risk in a way that's not just the sky is falling and crying wolf. You have to pick your battles. You have to really know what you're talking about. And when there is extreme risk, you communicate it. You can't say that every week. Every single time there's a new vulnerability or exploit, do your homework on how vulnerable you are and communicate it in a realistic manner. And over time, they'll kind of respond. I'm lucky that they were really looking to embrace security when I first came in. They were really looking for someone to come in and there was some champions before I even got there. That's not always the case. But I saw a lot of people understand, like, hey, Chris is the kind of guy that's not here to just tell me, no, we can't have these things. It's like, we can do this. It's just how we have to do it. And that went well.
That is great. I love that. Translating into their language, ARR, MRR, the business growth, related to their metrics and why it's important. And then you're gonna get more of their ear, I'm sure. Jonathan, same for you. How do you get buy-in from the exec team that your team are doing important stuff?
I wish I had a mathematical way to do it. There is a system that I don't use, but I'm interested, but it just takes a lot of effort. And it's probably a good year of work, so I haven't started it yet. It's called FAIR, and I think it stands for, is it Factor Analysis of Information Risk? I might be wrong on the acronym. It is a way to do what Chris is talking about, which is assign dollar values to risk, and then letting management say, oh, I understand that if I don't fix this, there's a probability it's going to lead to $3 million risk. So it's a good system, but again, it requires a lot of people to be on board. For me, what I do is, I think what a lot of us do is to say, okay, look, right now, my top 3 risks in terms of probability and basically harm to the company in terms of dollars are these things, and it will take this much effort to try and remediate those. And that's a much larger plan. So on a quarterly basis, I show executive management where we are from where we were before, where risks have changed, and I try and attribute them to really large number of values, something that's obviously not accurate, but in relation to one another, it gives them an idea of what should we focus on next quarter or next year.
Right. That's incredibly insightful from both of you. All right, one more question for me before we got a few questions building in the Q&A section. So my final question is one that I'm genuinely curious about. We've got a lot of tech coming in that's almost making it like our employees don't need to think about these things so much. So automated DLP, automated access controls. It's almost like blaze your path forward, do whatever you want to do, and this tech will take care of what you can and can't do within that realm. Do you see the future more of that, or do you see the future of more of the education and in the human brains, them knowing what they need to do, knowing what the policy should say and what they can and can't do? Or do you see it as actually the barriers are in place already and they'll know when they hit them, but it will take care of itself? Thoughts on that?
Well, I'll jump in. Sorry, I'll jump in. To me, it's going to rely upon technology in the same way that iPhones are so successful because they hide the difficulties of the technology to the user, and the user can just do what he wants to do.
Yeah.
In a similar way, as our company grows, as cloud risks increase probably exponentially, and as attacks also increase exponentially, I can't rely upon training everybody about all the domains of security that Chris and I and you are aware of. it's just a smarter, more efficient approach to automate as much of it as you can and let the user work the way he or she wants to work, not require them to learn 27 years of security knowledge.
Right. And almost the automation of the awareness itself. So almost like automating, like there's this part of the policy which you should have read when you joined, but I understand that you didn't, but it's now relevant to you at this point in time because you just did this thing. Automate the feeding of that to the person in the point in time, right? So it's not just awareness from outside of the human angle, it's like awareness of actually education as well.
Yeah.
Chris, your thoughts?
I agree 100%. That's the way it's going to be, and the shift is going to be from having to make do all the company awareness and kind of shotgun blast it and hope some of it sticks, to having your people configuring it, doing it right, and making sure that they're not leaving any loopholes and they're not missing something. That's going to be what's left over. So as long as you spend your time and effort setting the tools up right, not leaving gaps in there, and using the automation to shape the user experience in time, then you can shift from the people who are less security technical to people more security technical, invest in them more, give them, whatever training dollars you had, you can maybe pull back a little bit, pump it more to the security team so that they are setting all these things up right in the first place.
Amazing.
Which is not self-serving.
Yeah.
More money to the security team, I mean.
All right, guys, we've got some questions. We got 6 questions. I think some of them sort of group up. We won't get through all of them doing both of your answers to both. So I'll leave it as whoever wants to take each one. So the first one is, well, maybe we can just keep short answers from both of you here. Which teams, departments can be the most problematic when it comes to sharing sensitive data in the wrong place?
I'm going to speak.
Go ahead, Chris.
I'm going to speak generically. I know finance typically gets hit a lot because their job on a daily basis is just to click on invoices. They get emails with invoices, and so they're just programmed to click on and do their work. They're just, they get in a zone. So I know, industry wide, that's someone that is just constantly hit because because their job is literally not to sit there and analyze every single invoice for it to be different. It's to just get through them all. Right.
Okay. So you're saying they might accidentally click on phishing links that come across as, okay, that's interesting. Jonathan, when you think about it, which departments sort of stand out as sort of the key parts here?
Well, there are more than a few. So data scientists are notoriously bad because they just need data and they make copies wherever they can. So data scientists, partnerships, companies who are establishing partnerships with other companies that often need to share data. If you were, say, business to business and you deal with consumers, they want to share data. And people who work more, say, in office productivity tools like Google and Microsoft often will make copies of data that's necessary for their jobs, but then they forget about it. And that can be anywhere in the business, operations, customer support. It could be anywhere.
Okay, I like that. Yeah, data scientists, certainly, that is their job, to use data. They don't really think about that. They're optimizing for speed, that's for sure. I like this question. It's an interesting one. You're both very experienced security leaders. What's the worst piece of advice you've ever received when it comes to educating employees about security risks? Maybe we can also, Jonathan, do you want to go for this one as well? And then Chris will come to you.
Boy, the worst piece of advice, it was to use a certain product, which I won't name.
Okay, so use a certain product, name. Okay, that's very, very fair. Chris, yourself? Hopefully,
yeah.
By the way, Jonathan, I hope it's not Metomic.
Yeah,
no. A training product that's popular.
Training product. Okay, Chris, any pieces of advice either that you've given yourself or externally that you thought, actually, I've learned from that?
Something I learned from where someone just said, just teach people not to click on any links. And it's, if that's your answer, you're just confusing people because eventually they have to click on a link and they're, well, I'm not supposed to click on links and they're not doing their work. It's just a terrible idea to think that humans aren't going to click on links and that links are a vector, but if, we should have tools and procedures in place for them to know how to click a link. You just can't tell them they can't do that because it's half of how we communicate these days.
But the natural question is going to be, Chris, if it's not that piece, if it's not don't click on links, what is it? And you're saying it's to give them more just more.
Yeah, teach them how to differentiate a bad link from a good link. Don't just tell them that they can't do it, because then they're not going to do it, and then they're not going to do their job, and then they get in trouble. Then they click on every link. It's just going to go back and forth. It's give them the real advice, which is, first of all, have some tools in place that are hopefully stripping malicious links or scanning that. And then if they're still getting through that, before they're clicking on links, show them how they can look and see where it's really going.
Yeah. Okay, that is a good thing to think about. All right, there's similar questions, so Chris, I'm going to fire it back to you. Sort of already asked you it, but this is a question to come from the audience, so I'll give it to them. What is the? Sorry, it's moving so quickly that it's now gone. So, what's the best way to get new joiners up to speed?
Ooh, again, during the onboarding, kind of shotgun blasting everything we have. Going through the not in an arduous way, but kind of going through the policies from a big picture standpoint, showing them where it is, and then, in theory, doing some maybe right seat, left seat rides on some of the tech stacks that they're using, as part of, typically what I do is when they, it's a little bit of training up front, and then it's a little bit of, like, I'll say, I'm not gonna call them labs, but we'll call them like activities. We're actually physically doing something with it, and this isn't just necessarily a security thing. This is, if we're doing something for the SDLC, here's how we're going to go through the pipeline. Here's how we push it through with these things. Here's the checks. And then here's the points where we have to, link up if there's issues, and kind of just walking through that a couple times, I think does a lot. It just gets some experience with the tools, kind of sees what some of the feedback they may get, and then, gets them off and running. But
love it. And then Jonathan, new joiners coming in probably day-to-day beta. I'm sure you both have, but certainly a lot of new joiners in Lemonade. What's the best piece of advice you can give to give new joiners up to speed quickly?
Spread the training out, and the security related training out over time. There's an inverse relationship between how much you give somebody up front and how much they actually retain.
Right. Okay. Don't give them the billion policies all at once. As we were saying before, we maybe feed the policies in through the points in time, right, and over a period of time.
And don't give people 45-minute long videos. Give them 3-minute videos once every few weeks. Give them
TikToks. We got to. I think even 3 minutes might be too long nowadays, right? I mean, we've got to get this down to 5 seconds. That's what we can all work on together. TikTok, security awareness via TikTok. That will be a thing one day. All right, guys. Yeah. All right, we're going to wrap up really quickly. So I haven't had the chance too much to talk about Metomic, but that is all good. So the one thing I'll say is what we do at Metomic is we do low-code workflows to prevent unnecessary data risks cropping up in your business. One of the features that's been taken up to a standing level is employee notifications at a point in time. So employee does something, shares data in the wrong place, short notifications to say, hey, we're not meant to do this. As Jonathan pointed out, the effects of that are quite amazing. We haven't surfaced them in terms of numbers yet, but we certainly will be. But we will be doing a product demo. So our next webinar is going to be a product demo because it's been requested so much. It's on Tuesday, the 3rd of May, I assume at a similar time, so we can accommodate as many people as possible. I believe Marion will be sending a link in the Zoom chat now. So there'll be a product demo on Tuesday, the 3rd of May. Of course, you can reach out to us ahead of time and have a demo beforehand, a one-to-one demo. I think there's going to be a Calendly link posted in the Zoom chat as well for that. So if you want a demo before then, we can do it. Otherwise, that is it from me. We finished almost perfectly on time. So thanks to our speakers today, Jonathan and Chris. It was great to have this conversation. I hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, look forward to doing it again soon.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Bye, Chris. Bye, Rich. Thanks, Marion.
See you soon.
Okay. Bye.